My name is Cole Marshall. I am 28 years old, a first lieutenant in the United States Army, and I have learned that discipline can shape a man just as much as pain does. I grew up in a house where silence was louder than words and where respect was earned through obedience, not affection. My mother died when I was 12, and from that day, my father's world became smaller while mine felt heavier. He was a soldier through and through, the kind who woke up at 5 even after retirement just to prove he still had control. To him, control was love, and order was safety. My sister Lena got the softness that was left in him, and I got the expectations. I was supposed to be the one to carry his legacy, to live the life he wished he still had. Every decision I made felt like a test I could never pass. When I enlisted, I thought it would finally make him proud. I imagined him standing tall in his old uniform, maybe smiling a little when I saluted, but the day I told him, he only nodded and said it was about time I became useful. That moment taught me something I still carry. Some people see your achievements as reminders of what they lost. I didn't join to please him anymore. I joined because I needed to feel like I belonged somewhere, even if it wasn't home. Over the years, I learned to speak less and do more. The Army rewarded silence. It gave me medals, structure, and a paycheck, but deep down, I still wanted one thing. I never got: a simple sign that my father saw me. I told myself his coldness was a kind of respect, that his distance meant he trusted me to stand alone. But every time I went home and saw the way he looked past me to ask about Lena's new job, something inside me cracked a little more. I kept pushing, hoping the next promotion would change something between us. It never did. I told myself I didn't care, that I had built my own life, my own discipline, my own pride. But even at 28, with a uniform full of achievements, part of me was still that 12-year-old boy at the funeral, standing too straight, waiting for a father's hand on his shoulder that never came. That's who I am. A soldier who's good at following orders, even the ones that come from ghosts. And until recently, I thought that was enough to keep me safe. But family orders are the hardest to disobey. The envelope came on a Monday. It was thick, embossed with gold, and smelled like something expensive had been sealed inside. I knew it was Lena's wedding invitation before I even opened it. Her handwriting danced across the front in soft curves, a sharp contrast to how tight my chest felt reading my own name. The timing couldn't have been worse. I was due to deploy to Germany in 8 days. Orders had come in suddenly, and I had barely started packing my gear. When I called my commanding officer to explain the situation, he didn't flinch. Deployments don't pause for weddings, not even family ones. That night, my phone rang. It was my father. His voice was as clipped and cold as ever, like he was checking boxes on some internal list. He didn't ask how I was or if I was ready. He got straight to the point. He said I needed to be at Lena's wedding, not wanted, needed. When I reminded him I was under orders, he cut me off. He told me that if I missed the ceremony, I could forget about accessing the trust fund Mom had left behind. He said it calmly, like it was just a policy, not blackmail. The way he said it felt like he wasn't just punishing me. He was reminding me that no matter how far I'd come, I was still under his thumb. It wasn't about the money. I hadn't touched that account since I turned 18, even though I could have used it. I had paid my way through everything with Army stipends, late nights, and a whole lot of swallowing pride. But knowing he still saw me as someone who needed his leverage cut deeper than I expected. It told me that no matter the uniform or title, in his eyes, I was still just a kid waiting for permission. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence stretch so long that even he had to ask if I was still there. I told him I would think about it, which wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. That was how things worked between us. He gave commands. I acted like I had choices. After I hung up, I sat alone in my kitchen for a long time. I didn't even realize I was still holding the invitation. I looked down and saw Lena's note scribbled in the corner. Please be there. It didn't feel like a request. It felt like a warning. I tried to convince myself this was just a moment. That Dad didn't mean it how it sounded. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't about Lena. This wasn't about family. This was about control. He didn't want me there because he missed me or because it would mean something to him. He wanted to prove he still could make me bend. And the worst part? A part of me still wanted to go. Not for him, for her. For the idea that maybe, if I showed up, I could finally feel like I belonged. Like I was part of the picture instead of the shadow in the corner. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there thinking about what it meant to have value, and who gets to decide. My father had always treated love like it was something you earned, not something you were given. And for too long, I'd been trying to collect points in a game where the rules kept changing. I could have told him years ago that I never used the trust fund. I could have sent a statement or closed the account just to make a point. But I didn't. I let him believe I needed it. That he still had something over me. It wasn't about money. It never was. What I needed was a reason to stay connected, even if it was through control. Some part of me believed that as long as he thought I depended on him, he might see me as part of his world. The moment he realized I didn't need anything from him might have been the moment I lost him completely, and I wasn't ready for that. I was used to keeping quiet. That's how I survived childhood. When my mom died, I learned early that needing something was dangerous. If I cried too long, he told me to toughen up. If I asked too much, he reminded me that weakness had no place in our home. So I stopped asking. I stopped crying. I learned to fold my pain into silence. And that silence became armor. Letting him think he still had power over me gave me just enough space to breathe without setting him off. It was like keeping a wolf from the door by tossing out scraps. As long as he believed I still answered to him, he left me alone just enough. It's hard to explain what that kind of quiet feels like. It's not peace. It's not surrender. It's waiting. It's standing still because moving means losing the last thread you're holding onto. And sometimes, even a thread feels better than nothing. So I stayed quiet. Not because I was afraid, but because I still cared. And that was the part I hated most. I still wanted him to see me, not just as a soldier, not just as a son, but as someone worth loving without conditions. The night before the wedding, I sat at my kitchen table with the lights off and the envelope in front of me. It was the kind of plain, white stationery you could pick up anywhere, but what I put inside carried more weight than anything I'd said to him in years. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't even anger. It was a boundary, finally drawn in ink. Inside, I slipped 2 printed pages. One was a transaction record from the insurance provider. It showed how he had redirected a payout meant for me, part of a policy Mom had set up before she passed, and quietly moved it under his own trust. No authorization, no discussion. Just a quiet theft cloaked in fatherhood. The second page was smaller. A torn scrap from a yellow notepad I kept in my desk drawer. I'd written one sentence on it, slow and clear, in my own hand. "You don't own me anymore." That was all. Nothing else needed to be said. I folded the papers carefully, slid them into the envelope, and sealed it shut. Then I held it for a long time. It was strange how light it felt, considering everything it carried. But I wasn't shaking. My breath was steady. I wasn't afraid of what came next. I had already lived with fear long enough. This wasn't about making him pay. It was about showing myself that I could finally let go of the version of me that kept waiting for his approval. That little boy inside who begged to be seen didn't need to beg anymore. I had proof now, proof of what he'd done. But more than that, proof that I could walk away without looking back. I slipped the envelope into the inner pocket of my jacket, zipped it closed, and sat there in silence. Not the old kind, not the kind that hurt. This was new. This was mine. The chapel was already full when I arrived. Rows of guests in soft tones, heads turned toward the aisle, music echoing gently in the corners. I walked in through the side entrance in full dress uniform, the medals on my chest catching the light. Heads turned. Conversations paused. You could feel the air shift, like someone had opened a door that wasn't meant to be touched. I didn't look for Lena. I didn't look for the groom. I looked straight ahead, toward the man standing near the altar with that same squared stance he used to have in his prime. My father. He spotted me instantly. He smiled, that smug, knowing smile that said he believed he'd won again, that I'd come crawling back just like he planned. He stepped forward, hand outstretched like he'd summoned me from some distance only he understood. I didn't take it. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the envelope, and held it between us. He looked confused for a beat, then annoyed. I said nothing until he took it from my hand. And when he did, I said just one thing. I came to the end of the game. Then I turned and walked to the far side of the room, away from the center, away from him. I didn't need to watch him open it. I didn't need to see his expression shift. But I did. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it all happen in slow motion. First the smirk, then the furrowed brow, then the disbelief. His hands trembled slightly as he read the document, his lips moving, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Then came the flush in his face, the tight jaw, the way he looked around like someone had pulled the rug out from under him in front of a crowd. He opened the second page, the one with my handwriting. His shoulders stiffened. He folded the paper again, slower this time, like the weight of it had tripled. But he didn't come after me. Not yet. I stood still, arms folded, letting the silence do the work. No shouting, no confrontation, just truth laid bare in front of everyone he tried to control. There was power in that silence. Not the kind he taught me, mine. He walked away without saying a word. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in his shadow. I felt like I had finally stepped out of it. I found Lena in the bridal suite after most of the guests had started to clear out. She was still in her dress, sitting on the edge of a velvet bench, bouquet forgotten on the floor. Her eyes were glassy but dry, like she'd been holding back more than just tears. When she saw me, she didn't smile, she just let out a breath that sounded like it had been waiting years to leave. She asked me if I knew, about the insurance, about the trust. I nodded once, careful not to crowd her. She looked down at her lap, then reached over to a drawer and pulled out a manila folder. It was full of contracts, bank statements, and documents with her signature in places she didn't remember signing. Dad had been managing most of the wedding payments, or so he said, but the money had been moving in directions she hadn't approved. He told her it was normal, that family trusts get messy, that she didn't need to worry about the fine print, and she believed him because he was our dad, because he said it with that same steady tone he used our whole lives. The one that made us feel like speaking up was the real offense. Then she told me something I didn't expect. She had seen the envelope. Not the contents, but the way I handed it off. The way I didn't flinch. She said it was the first time she realized I wasn't playing his game anymore. That silence could be a kind of resistance, too. She stood up and looked at herself in the mirror. The dress suddenly seemed heavier on her, like it didn't belong to her story anymore. She took off the veil first, then the earrings. Then she turned to me and said she wasn't going through with it. Not today, not like this. It wasn't about the groom. It was about her. About all the ways she'd let herself be bent into the version Dad wanted. The polished daughter. The obedient one. She said she couldn't say I don't to someone else when she hadn't even said it to him yet. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just stood there, two kids who finally understood that surviving someone's control isn't the same as being free. She asked if I'd walk her out, not down the aisle. Out of the building, I said yes. And, just like that, we left. I didn't say goodbye to him. There was no final word, no confrontation in the parking lot. I left the wedding the way I arrived, quiet, calm, steady. Lena walked beside me for a while, then turned back to handle what came next. I kept moving forward. The airport was unusually empty. I sat near the gate in uniform, the same one he once wore, but mine no longer felt like a mirror of his. It was mine now, earned on my own terms. I watched the planes through the glass and felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not excitement, not triumph, just peace. The flight to Germany was long, but I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. My mind wasn't racing like it used to. There was no replay of what I should have said or what I wished I'd done. The moment had passed, and I had walked through it exactly how I needed to. For most of my life, I thought healing would come from finally hearing the right words from him. An apology, a thank you, maybe even I'm proud of you. But now I know some things don't get fixed. Some people never say what you need them to, and that's not your fault. He didn't change, but I did. I stopped trying to prove my worth. I stopped waiting for permission to be who I already was. That was the shift. Not a victory over him, but a quiet decision to stop playing a rigged game. On that flight, I realized you don't always have to burn the bridge. Sometimes, you just stop crossing it. You let it sit there, abandoned, and you choose another path. That's what freedom feels like. Not loud, not messy, just different, just yours. As the plane descended into Frankfurt, I looked out at the clouds and thought about my mom. I wondered what she would have said. I'd like to think she'd be proud. Not in the uniform, not of the gesture, but of the boy who finally stopped chasing silence. If you're someone still waiting for a parent to see you, still hoping that one day they'll finally say the words you've needed to hear, I want you to know something. You don't have to wait anymore. You don't need their permission to become whole. You don't owe anyone your peace just because they share your blood. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away without slamming the door. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough to choose yourself. Approval can feel like oxygen when you've been deprived of it your whole life, but you'll learn how to breathe on your own. It just takes time, and it starts the moment you decide to stop asking for what someone refuses to give. If this story hit something inside you, you're not alone. I've been there, and if you feel ready, share your story in the comments. Maybe someone out there needs your truth the way I once needed mine. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real ones, hard ones, healing ones, subscribe to the channel. We're all trying to find our way home, even if it means building that home from scratch.